For centuries, the Roman Empire stood as an unstoppable force, its legions crushing enemy after enemy. But beyond the empire's northern borders, hidden in the dark forests of Germania, there lived a people who refused to be tamed. They were fierce, relentless, and unyielding warriors who would become Rome's greatest nightmare. The Germanic tribes were no ordinary enemies. Unlike the structured and disciplined Romans, they fought with raw ferocity, striking from the shadows, using the terrain to their advantage. They had no mighty cities, no vast fortifications, only their warbands, their traditions, and their unbreakable will. And when Rome sought to conquer them, they fought back with a vengeance that would shake the empire to its core. These warriors were the ancestors of modern Germans, Dutch, and Scandinavians, and their origins stretch back thousands of years. Their story begins not in Germania, but in the distant past, on the vast steppes of Eastern Europe, where the Indo-Europeans, the ancestors of most European peoples, first tamed horses and forged bronze weapons. Over generations, some of these nomads migrated westward, settling in the dense forests and river valleys of northern Europe. Here, they formed loose tribal societies, living off the land, hunting, farming, and raiding their neighbors. Their world was harsh. Survival demanded strength, and leadership was not granted by birthright alone. A king might rule in name, but true power lay with the war leaders, men who commanded loyalty through victory. A leader who lost a battle often lost his life, for the tribes had no patience for weakness. They followed only those who proved themselves worthy. Their armies were not the professional legions of Rome, but bands of warriors bound by loyalty and honor. Most fought on foot, armed with spears, axes, and large wooden shields. Armor was rare, reserved for the wealthiest among them, while the rest relied on speed, numbers, and sheer ferocity. Unlike Rome's drilled formations, the Germanic warriors fought in loose, fast-moving units, striking suddenly and disappearing into the forests before the enemy could regroup. Their discipline was harsh. A deserter was hanged from a tree. A coward was not merely executed. He was drowned in a swamp, his body pinned beneath wooden hurdles as a warning to others. To fight was not just a duty but an expectation. The Germanic tribes had their own form of government gatherings called things, where warriors and elders debated matters of war and peace. Leaders spoke, but power rested in the hands of the people. If they approved, they clashed their weapons against their shields in agreement. If not, they groaned in disapproval, forcing their rulers to reconsider. It was a society ruled not by kings, but by warriors, and they had their gods, deities that bore striking resemblances to the Norse gods of later centuries. Tacitus, a Roman historian, described their chief deity as Wodenaz, a precursor to Odin, the one-eyed god of war and wisdom. Donner, the thunder god, later became Thor, and Tyr, the god of war and justice, was known to the Romans as Mars. They performed ritual sacrifices, read omens in the flight of birds and the patterns of runes, and believed that those who died in battle would feast forever in the halls of the gods. Rome's first encounters with these tribes were bloody. In the late 2nd century BC, the Cimbri and Teutons swept southward, crushing Roman armies and threatening Italy itself. Though eventually defeated, their invasion sent a clear message. Germania was a land of warriors, not to be taken lightly. Julius Caesar himself faced them during his conquest of Gaul. He wrote of their towering stature, their fearless charges, and their utter contempt for Roman rule. After his victories, Rome established a frontier along the Rhine, but the Germanic tribes were not content to be mere neighbors. The empire soon learned that to venture too far into the dark forests of Germania was to invite disaster. The ultimate humiliation came in the year 9 AD. The Roman general Varus, believing Germania to be pacified, marched 3 legions deep into enemy territory. But he was betrayed. A Germanic leader named Arminius, trained in Roman warfare, lured Varus into an ambush in the Teutoburg forest. The result was catastrophic. 20,000 Roman soldiers were slaughtered, their bodies left to rot in the mud. It was one of the worst defeats in Roman history, and it shattered Rome's dream of conquering Germania. From then on, Rome abandoned plans of expansion beyond the Rhine. Instead, it resorted to bribery, diplomacy, and divide-and-rule tactics, pitting one tribe against another. Some Germanic leaders even served in the Roman army, gaining wealth and influence within the empire. But the tension never disappeared. The Germanic tribes grew stronger, their warriors more experienced, their numbers ever increasing. By the 2nd century AD, they were no longer just raiders, they were an existential threat. The Marcomannic Wars saw massive invasions of Germanic warriors into Roman lands, forcing Emperor Marcus Aurelius himself to fight brutal campaigns along the frontier. These conflicts drained Rome's resources, stretched its armies thin, and exposed the growing cracks in its once invincible empire. Centuries later, in 476 AD, the Western Roman Empire finally collapsed. And who stood at the gates of Rome when it fell? Not Persians, not Huns, but Germanic warriors, the same ruthless fighters who had resisted Roman rule for generations. The Visigoths, Ostrogoths, Vandals, and Lombards, all descendants of those early tribes, carved up the empire and built kingdoms of their own. The fall of Rome was not a sudden collapse, but a slow and painful unraveling. Over centuries, the Germanic tribes, once considered mere barbarians on the fringes of civilization, had become a formidable force. They had learned from Rome, adopting its weapons, its tactics, and even its language. Some had served as mercenaries in the Roman legions, while others had risen to power within the empire itself. But in the end, they were not content to be Rome's soldiers. They wanted more. The Visigoths were the first to make history. In 410 AD, led by their king Alaric, they marched into the heart of the empire and did the unthinkable. They sacked Rome. For the first time in 800 years, the Eternal City fell to a foreign enemy. Roman citizens were slaughtered, treasures were plundered, and the world was shaken. This was not the work of savages. It was a calculated act of vengeance by a people who had been wronged by Rome for generations. But the Visigoths were only the beginning. In 455 AD, another Germanic tribe, the Vandals, stormed Rome and looted it so thoroughly that their name would forever become synonymous with destruction. The empire, once an unbreakable titan, was now crumbling under its own weight. The final blow came in 476 AD. The last emperor of Rome, a boy named Romulus Augustulus, was deposed by a Germanic warlord named Odoacer. He did not claim the throne for himself. He simply declared that there was no need for an emperor anymore. Rome was finished. The Western Empire had fallen, and in its place, the Germanic tribes carved out their own kingdoms. The Ostrogoths took Italy, the Franks seized Gaul, the Visigoths ruled Spain, and the Vandals controlled North Africa. But these were not just new realms of chaos. The Germanic rulers did not seek to erase Rome's legacy. They sought to claim it for themselves. They adopted Roman laws, Roman administration, and even the Christian faith. They ruled as kings, not emperors, but in many ways, they saw themselves as the rightful heirs of Rome. Yet, the dream of empire was not forgotten. Centuries later, a new Germanic power would rise, the Franks. Their greatest ruler, Charlemagne, would forge an empire that stretched across Western Europe, reviving the idea of Roman rule under a new name, the Holy Roman Empire. It was not the Rome of Caesar and Augustus, but it was built on the foundation of what came before. The Germanic tribes did not just bring down Rome. They reshaped the world. They ended an empire, but in its place, they laid the foundations of medieval Europe. The kingdoms they forged would one day become the nations of Germany, France, Italy, and Spain. Their warriors, once feared as ruthless barbarians, became the kings and emperors of the New World Order. In the end, Rome was not destroyed by foreign invaders, it was transformed from within. The Germanic tribes did not simply conquer Rome. They became it,